I'm going to need to summon some spirits, some extroverted spirits to get me through this next 30 minutes. Dear, who's the biggest extrovert? Dear Lucille Ball, please give me the energy of somebody who can stuff 50 chocolates in her mouth at once.
It's the extrovert's prayer.
May I continue to process externally.
May I please not be overstimulated on today's day.
And may I gain energy from this conversation.
Amen. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Per My Last Email, your favorite boss's favorite podcast. I'm your co-host, Kyle Hagee.
And I'm Kaila Lopez.
And today we're talking about introverts and extroverts at work. Kaila.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
This is an interesting question.
It shouldn't be, because we planned it ahead of time.
I've been thinking about it a lot. I think I am an extrovert,
Okay.
but I think I don't like to be around people that much, which is an interesting dilemma.
That might be a contradiction in terms. Why do you think you're an extrovert?
I think I gain energy when I'm around people. I think I am very loud, and I like to have conversations. And once I'm in a social situation, I feel pretty comfortable there, and I can stay there for a while. But I do hit my limit, and then once I hit my limit, I'm like, I need to get out of here.
Yeah. Do you feel like you recharge around people or alone?
I think around people, but I do need my alone time. So that's kind of a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, this is on a scale of introversion to extroversion and ambiversion's in the middle. So you don't need to be 100 or 0.
I don't think I'm 100% really anything. But what about you?
Yeah, I would say you're an extrovert. I'm an introvert.
Which is very surprising.
Which most people are very surprised at, which is, I think, both good and bad. Mm-hmm. When I do a Myers-Briggs or I do some sort of test, I'm 60-40, 65-35 introvert. So introvert leaning, if you will, a light introvert. And yeah, people are very surprised by that.
Because you're very personable and you spend a lot of time with people.
Yeah, keep it going. I'm personable. I'm cool. No, I think this is maybe a common misconception, which is introversion doesn't mean shy. Introversion doesn't mean you can't be gregarious.
Gregarious.
Yeah,
wow.
Gregarious. Introversion clearly means you have a great vocabulary.
SAT word over here.
But when you look at what are the common traits that define introvert versus extrovert, introverts tend to recharge when they're alone. People tire them out. It doesn't mean they don't like to be around people. It doesn't mean they can't be great in social settings, but it's tiring. Yeah. I need alone time to recharge.
But so do I.
Yeah, well,
Am I an introvert?
Maybe you're taking the test wrong. I don't know. No. Classic extrovert behavior. and Susan Cain, in her book Quiet, which is a really fantastic book, I recommend everyone read it. She talks about the main difference between an introvert and an extrovert is stimulation. Extroverts thrive in highly stimulated environments, so they have a higher threshold for stimulation. Introverts' stimulation tires them out. So
can you define that a little bit more?
Yeah, if there's loud noises, if there's lots going on, I would say extroverts kind of enjoy chaos, and they can they love when there's a lot going on and there's people and there's glasses clinking and it's a fun experience. Introverts, if you put me in a rave, I'm the worst version of myself. There's too much going on. I like controlled, low stimulated environments. That's where I feel most at peace, most confident.
Yeah. Okay. And so noted that it's exclusively the introversion that makes you not happy in a rave.
Yeah. That's just it. Yeah.
That's just it. Great.
It's not the drugs. No.
No.
So I guess do you always feel like you were an extrovert, going back to your childhood?
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah.
I think I've always been very outgoing. But it is interesting because I really do have a social cap, and I think that has increased as I've gotten older. I love to go hang out with friends and stuff, and I'm comfortable at a rave and I'm comfortable in a library, whatever. But
that's the new test. Are you comfortable at a rave? Yes or no? Introvert, extrovert. Boom.
But I also have a hard cap, and people, my friends have been making fun of me recently because they're it's 9 o'clock. Kayla's got to go home.
I think that's just getting old.
Yeah, I think so too. So maybe that's not a good test.
It's interesting because I think I was always an introvert, and I might have even been more introverted as a kid. And I know I said introversion and shyness are different, and Susan Cain in her book like makes a huge call out on that. I was so shy as a kid.
Really?
Like tremendously so.
Okay.
I remember like I would go to a party, like a parent's party, and I'm in like 4th grade, and there'd be other kids, and it would take me like an hour and a half just to like warm up and even to like go up to someone. And it was really hard for me to go to new situations where I didn't know people and like strike up a conversation or get comfortable with people. And I do actually think that really held me back in a lot of ways. Like I was very, very shy as a kid. I've gotten less shy over time, but I think I was shy maybe because of my introversion, and I just had to learn how to overcome that shyness.
Yeah.
But now definitely still an introvert.
What do you think made you switch? Like, do you have a moment where you realized that you could adopt some more extroverted traits?
Honestly, I think I realized that I had to in order to like live the life I wanted to or like quote unquote get ahead, both like personally, but also professionally, which is what we'll talk about is like introversion and extroversion at the office. But I remember my freshman year of college, hands down, like the worst year of my life.
Okay.
I grew up obviously in the same city in Minnesota for my whole life. So I had lifelong friends that I already warmed up to. I already knew. I was really comfortable with them. It was like a controlled environment. When I went to my freshman year of school, I went to Washington, D.C. I didn't know a single soul. It was a new environment, and it was all this unstructured, just like get to know people. And wow, I just like had a terrible, terrible time.
Wild.
It was so hard for me, like really, really hard. I did not do well. I had so little friends, and it was really challenging. So much where I had to transfer back home to get back to a more comfortable environment. And I think while that was the hardest year of my life by far, and when I was in it, I was like, I hate this. I would pay any amount of money for this to go away. Looking back on it now, most impactful year of my life.
Oh, wow.
And I learned so much, and I think I learned a ton of lessons that have carried over into my professional career about figuring out how to make friends, figuring out how to be comfortable in new environments in a way that I had to learn that lesson kind of a hard way, and it's benefited me ever since.
It's so interesting because when I first met you, that absolutely did not like clock for me at all. Like, I remember when you first moved to New York, you were just like hitting people up on Twitter, like, let's get a coffee, let's hang out. And like, you made such a wide network of friends so effectively and so quickly. And even though I feel like I have like extroverted traits, I was like, you could not pay me enough to do that.
Yeah.
Like that was very impressive. And I find it so fascinating that you are still considering yourself an introvert.
Well, that's what the studies show, but I maybe present more as an extrovert. But again, I think that's a common misconception, which is like, just because you're maybe like can be social or can be effective in social situations, you don't feel like the internal processing that I'm doing or like my energy getting drained until I think there was a time where you realized,
my gosh, that was I
actually was an introvert, and it was one of our first work trips we ever did. So break down when you realized I was actually an introvert.
Yeah, because we had been working together probably for, let's say, 8 months at this point, and I'd known you pretty well. You had moved to New York a few months prior, and we were friends. And I was like, he was saying he's an introvert. This man is not an introvert. Until it was like day 3 where we're in Boston visiting our boss, and we were together. It was like the whole team was together basically, let's say like 20 hours out of the day. Like we were doing a lot of work, and then we were going, to dinner and going to drinks and relaxing and staying in the same hotel.
And a cohort was running at that time. So I was also like talking to you all day. And then when I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to like 40 people that were in the courses.
Yeah.
So I was literally talking to people all day.
And it was day 3. We were walking back to the hotel, and Kyle was dead silent. He was not saying a word. And I was like, did I do something to like piss him off?
Is he going to quit?
What's going on? And like, just like looked miserable. And he was like, we were like planning on going to dinner or something. And he was like, I'm so sorry, you guys. Like, I cannot look at you like for another second. I think he said it like much nicer than that. He was just like, I need some alone time.
But that's what I meant.
But that's what you meant.
Yeah.
You guys.
And so I think why we're talking about this topic on the episode is obviously you bring your personality to the workplace. And there is a style of work that I think is very common in the US, which favors extroverts. They've done a ton of research on this. they say that like extroverts will make about $10,000 more per year than introverts. Oftentimes, extroverts are overrepresented as leaders, as CEOs, because they talk more. They are more
visibility.
Yeah, they're more visible. And so there is this almost like introversion tax in the workplace where if you are an introvert and you lean into that, you are probably missing out on opportunities. You're missing out on career advancement. And, you know, I've referenced this book a few times because it had a profound impact on me, Quiet. She talks about how workplaces need to do a better job of giving introverts more exposure, more opportunities, because they're missing out on the talent of introverts.
Yeah. There's
things extroverts do very well. There's things introverts do tremendously well, but the workplace is geared to really support extroverts and not introverts. And, you know, I think companies that can get a hold of that are going to do a lot better. But also as an introvert in the workplace, like it can be really hard in some situations to thrive based on kind of the defaults we have in America. Do you feel like your extroversion has benefited you in the workplace?
Yeah, 100%. I think that when you're thinking about like the definition of extroversion versus introversion, right? It's the energy, like where you get your energy. Extroverts, it's around people. The processing, do you process internally or do you process while speaking?
Yep.
And then it's sensitivity. Are you highly sensitive to external stimuli? For extroverts, all of those things are the things that are valued in a workplace.
Yep.
So being around other people, you're in an office all day interacting with people, that's how you get visibility. Processing out loud, I'm talking through my ideas.
Just like talking more in a meeting, oh, they must be the leader.
They must be the leader, that they must be smart if they're very comfortable talking. That's another thing that gets you more visibility, promotes you probably faster.
Yep.
And sensitivity, being less sensitive to external stimuli. Granted, we're not going to raves at work, but it is like, you know, there's people talking, there's maybe music in the background, there's the water cooler. If you need a quiet environment, the office is probably not going to be the best opportunity for you to get work done and be super productive.
Yeah, it's funny because there's this giant movement towards like open office floor plans. And you know the architect that did that was the biggest extrovert of all time. They were like, oh, people just want to bump into each other and rub elbows and so much stimulation and talking and chatting. And, you know, there's pros to that, but most research suggests that an open office floor plan decreases productivity and like increases sickness because you don't have a quiet time to focus. And if about half of the population, a third to a half, is introverted, basically half the people that are showing up at your company aren't in a proper situation to thrive. The brainstorming and the talking out loud piece is also very interesting. They've done a ton of research on what is the most effective way to brainstorm. And when you hear the word brainstorm as you're listening, you're thinking of 5 people get in a conference room,
shouting shit out.
Someone's got a marker. They're on the whiteboard and they're like, "There's no bad ideas. What do you got?" And people are shouting out ideas. That leads to worse ideas. And the way that you're actually supposed to brainstorm is people know the prompt ahead of time. They think about it individually in quiet, in isolation. So they come up with their best idea. Then you meet and you share those ideas, and then you can start to connect the dots. But if you miss out on that like quiet alone time, you're basically like sabotaging the introverts on your team. You're not giving them space to think, and you're going to end up with a worse result.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's very interesting. It's kind of similar to how like offices are a little too cold for women because like men designed like the ideal working temperature for men. And so it's like women are at a slight disadvantage. It's like, okay, you just need to bring a sweatshirt to the office. But like multiply that times 10 and that's like introverts.
Or multiply that to everything in the world because probably was a dude that messed something up along the way. It's interesting. I think there's something that I've noted about you and me
let's hear it.
That highlights, I think, the differences between introverts and extroverts. So, you know, again, people tend to be confused that I'm an introvert because I'm on a podcast, I'm speaking, I do a ton of panels. I do a ton of moderation. Like, I think I'm a really good public speaker.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, that doesn't mean that I'm an extrovert. I think I prep for those quiet and alone. Even when I'm giving talks, like we were running these cohorts, I would have to be home alone, door locked, no one else in my no one else in my apartment. I have those big Apple headphones on to kill all stimuli so I can be focused. And that's where I thrive. And so my kind of advice for introverts is like, just because you're an introvert, don't think you can't be a great public speaker. You just have to create an environment where you can thrive. Now, on the flip side of that, we would go to happy hours.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think is one of your best skills.
Okay.
And you're just drinking.
Cut that.
This is one of your best skills, and I think it really highlights the difference.
Okay.
Happy hours to me are really unstructured.
Yeah.
I actually get really nervous and like overstimulated when I go to a happy hour that's just like, we're just gonna bond and like meet people, because I feel like I don't know what we're supposed to talk about. I don't know how long I'm supposed to talk to one person. I don't like what the topics of conversation are. And I really struggle if there's not like a clear, this is why we're here to chat. And also introverts thrive in one-on-one conversations, not in group environments. And so a group environment's just way too much stimulation for me. Something I think you're tremendous at is like, I feel like you can have a conversation with like any different person, unstructured, spark up conversation that feels really authentic. And I can tell like it's probably giving you energy. You like doing it. And that's something I've always admired in you.
Interesting.
And so I think what's interesting is like, I wouldn't say that you do a ton of public speaking.
Not at all.
Hence, you are on a podcast. But,
no, besides this,
but put that aside.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you do a ton of public speaking, but you thrive in more unstructured environments, which I think is where extroverts thrive. So it's always something I've admired in you, but I think it highlights the differences between us, but how you can find your spot, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. And I think, thanks. I'm great at a happy hour. So invite me out, folks. No, and but I get so burnt out so quickly from those environments. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have been on, like it's very like, okay, there's a group of 10 people and like, let's be fun and exciting and like ask everyone questions and stuff. I think I'm also just like nosy.
You are a nosy person.
So I'm always like, what's going on in your life? Like, tell me everything, just because I just like really want to know. But I appreciate that. I'm not trying to like downplay the compliment.
Yeah.
What I do think is really interesting is in the workplace specifically, we've discussed already that, extroversion is kind of appreciated a little bit more than introversion. And I think that becomes really clear as a manager. And so
say more.
When I was managing Charlotte, who I don't think would be offended when I say that she's very much an introvert and like a
loser.
Like, no, like textbook introvert. And I think that's something that was very different between the two of us. The processing part was really tough for me as a manager to understand because she was fantastic. I had genuinely zero issues at all. And what I realized was the way that I process ideas was to talk them out.
Yep.
Like I would just blurt whatever was in my mind and I'd be like, oh, that was a really bad idea. But I've said it and now we move on.
Yeah, you're thinking.
I'm thinking through it.
Exactly.
And I'll be like, well, that was stupid. How about this idea instead? And I wouldn't think too much about everything that was kind of coming out of my mouth, for better or for worse. And with it, like even right now, I'm like, just like chat. I'm just like, oh, let's keep talking. Whereas you're very concise and you've like thought through all this stuff before. With Charlotte, she would have an idea for maybe a different process or something that she wanted to change in our workflow. And she would mention it. And I would, at the beginning, be like, oh, that's something that just came into her brain. Like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I would forget about it and we would never address it again.
Yeah.
And I realized that no, she had been spending multiple days thinking through her mind, the pros and cons of this idea, thinking through all the possible risks. And when she was offering up an idea, it wasn't a like, oh, this just occurred to me. If we don't use it, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I've blurted out plenty of ideas that we never use.
Right. So if you were like dismissive of an idea, you were really dismissive of the week that she spent thinking about that.
Exactly.
Whereas if she was like a little like reckless towards your idea, you wouldn't be offended because you were just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting because they have done research on the best management types based on the employee that you're managing. And what they found is introverted leaders are the best with proactive employees because what introverts thrive at is listening, understanding, processing deeply. And if you have a proactive employee that's doing all the thinking without you having to tell them, coming to you with like pretty finalized ideas, you take that very seriously.
Yeah.
And you think about it deeply and you give feedback that is worthy of the time they invested into that.
I like that.
Extroverted leaders are better with I would say like less proactive employees,
Okay.
not worse, but they need a little more motivation. They need to be kind of told what to do or inspired to take action. And that's where extroverted leaders thrive. You spend 10 minutes with an extroverted leader, you're walking out of that room, you are pumped, ready to go, and then you go and do the work. Whereas introverts tend to bring work to you, and they respond a little better with like introverted leaders that are going to listen and understand with them.
Yeah, interesting. And just to think out loud for a second, it almost sounds like introverts are maybe better reactive leaders if they have more proactive employees, and the opposite may be true.
Yeah.
Like an extrovert is a more proactive leader to more reactive employees.
Yeah.
Which totally makes sense. I think it's really hard though to like optimize for that situation. Like you may not know when you're hiring somebody, I'm an introvert and therefore I should, look for a more proactive employee on my team. I think that's going to be very hard, but it is helpful to have that information.
Well, so I think it's less hard than you think. And I think this is a really good piece of advice is we often show up in the world thinking that other people are like us. We only have our lived experience.
Yeah.
So how I process information, I assume, unless told otherwise, you're going to process information in that same way.
Yeah.
And so the best thing you can do as a leader or as a member of a team is understand, like, yeah, are you an introvert or extrovert? And you're not trying to find that out just to like know their personality, but it's going to give you clues on how to interact with that colleague or with that direct report. If they're telling you, hey, I'm more introverted, maybe talking about big assignments in a one-on-one setting, maybe giving them time to think and process, maybe running the brainstorm more effectively like we talked about is going to be better for that type of individual. So there's something called a personal user guide that Claire Hughes Johnson, the author of Scaling People, talks about all the time, where basically you create a like working with me manual.
Yeah.
Here's how I like to be communicated with. Here's my work preferences. Here's my Myers-Briggs or my Strengths Finders or my introversion extroversion scale. It gives other people clues or hints or tactics on how to best work with you. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice you can do for any team.
I really love that tactic, and I think it adds a little nuance to the conversation of like introvert versus extrovert. Another thing that I was thinking about before this conversation was like, I was prepared to come in here and be like, extroverts are the best leaders, like that we're optimizing for traits, and the traits that make the best leaders are like the ones that are more comfortable talking. And I was thinking like, I can't even think of any leaders that are like introverted at all. And then I remembered something that we used to talk about a lot a few years ago was the memo that Jeff Bezos requires before every meeting. So one of the things that Amazon does is instead of doing PowerPoints that are presented in the moment, they do memos that are written ahead of time. And then the first like 5 to 10 minutes, everyone has a printed out memo and they are forced to read it. So you know that everyone has done the homework basically.
In silence, you're reading quietly.
Yeah. And then you discuss the idea that the person is presenting. And it occurred to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a very introverted way of approaching a presentation versus somebody coming in and like talking at you and you're expected to like react in that moment. And so I looked it up, and Jeff Bezos actually does consider himself an introvert.
I would 100% like have told you that ahead of time because it's so true. And again, I think this goes back to, you hear Jeff Bezos speak, and I mean, he's a really smart guy and he can be incredibly motivating, and you just assume, oh, he's an extrovert.
Yeah.
You don't see the work that is going in preparation, and even how they structured Amazon, to your point. It allows for introverts to thrive, and I think that's why they're so successful. The only reason is they enable their introverts.
Yeah.
It's super, super interesting. Have you ever felt a time at work where you feel like, oh, like this style isn't like working for me? Like I'm an extrovert and this isn't helping, or I would prefer a different environment. I'm trying to suss out some like tactics for people on if they're in an environment that they don't like, how they can craft a better environment based on their personality type.
Sure, yeah. So if we're thinking about the external versus internal processing, for me, when I was writing a lot of like lengthy, let's call them reports, by myself, I was really struggling with that, and I would procrastinate a lot. It's a lot of unstructured time where you are expected to like do the research by yourself, come up with the ideas by yourself, present them, and then they go to edit. And for me, that was really challenging. And so what I ended up doing was, especially when we were in the office more, was like talking to you about it or pulling somebody else in and being like, this is my idea. Can I get some feedback on this while I'm still writing it? Because I need to talk it out in order to like get to my point. And so that change, which probably detracted you from your job a little
like,
bit.
Kayla's coming. I got to run away. She's going to pull me into
Put
a
the
conference
headphones
room.
in.
Yeah.
Was really helpful for me, and it made me enjoy my job a lot better. And then I started pulling Charlotte in for some of these conversations a little bit more. But I wasn't expecting her to do the same for me.
Yeah.
Like when she was writing those.
It's such an interesting point. I've never heard you explain it like that, but it makes so much sense. I do think that like you often would, have, some like framework, some outline of what you're working on. And you'd be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Like, give me some feedback. Let's talk it out.
Yeah.
And that produces incredible work for you. For me, like, I like knowing the assignment.
Yeah.
And then when people are like in the moment, like, so like, what should we do? If I haven't thought about it, I'm going to give you the world's dumbest idea. Like,
but that's the whole point.
but I haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
What I like is like literally sitting down in a Google Doc, being like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the resources we have?
Yep.
Like, I really like writing like 1 or 2 page kind of memos to myself, because I feel like if you can write it, it means I've thought about it, and I feel very like, okay, this is a logical flow. So that's how I would thrive. If you were like every day, like, hey, can I check your Google Doc? Like, it's not done yet. Let me get to my point. So I think, again, it just highlights a different way that extroverts and introverts work. Going back to why I think extroverts are rewarded, it's exactly what we're saying. I think tons of times you're in a meeting, and the decision that you're going to make that's going to impact the business is expected to be made during that meeting, almost with no prep time.
Yep.
And so when someone's like, what should we do to turn this business around? And you're like, I've been in this meeting 5 minutes. I didn't know this was the question. The people that are going to speak up are the extroverts.
Yep.
The people that are going to be more comfortable sharing an idea are the extroverts. And so you can only pick an idea that's been presented. Extroverts present more ideas. Those ideas get picked, and they rise the rank because, wow, they're a leader. They're coming up with ideas. And I think that's why we have this overrepresentation of extroversion in leadership.
Yep.
And I think, again, like, the best business outcome is going to result from having the best people in the right seats and giving them environments where they can thrive. And right now, for most workplaces, it's not an introvert's world, and so extroverts crush it.
Yeah, and I think one tactic for kind of maybe evening the playing field a little bit is, as an extrovert, like, remembering that not everyone is like you. And, we would always do this, like, oh, make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak in a meeting. If somebody hasn't raised their hand, like, say, like, oh, Kyle, what are your thoughts? That's like kind of maybe the worst thing you could do. And now it's just occurring to me now, being like, Charlotte hasn't spoken. Like, what do you think? It's like, oh, I'm still processing this. Like, please don't put me on the spot. I think providing opportunities to like give everyone the time to think through something. Maybe it's giving the memo ahead of time, or maybe it's saying, we're planning on talking about X, Y, and Z. Here's the agenda. Think about this.
Yep.
That can maybe help level the playing field a little bit more.
This is why I deeply believe that I was a really good community manager in my previous role at Morning Brew, because I was an introvert. And I think introverts love structure, and they provide an environment where everyone knows the expectations. There's clear guidance on what you're going to do, and they're building for themselves. I think extroverts can thrive in almost any situation. Introverts need a little more tailoring. So if you're an introverted leader and you're tuned into the senses of introverts, you create environments where introverts can thrive and extroverts can thrive. If the courses we were doing were in person and like way more chaotic, I would have been so less effective. But because they were online, a little more thoughtful, I think I was really, really good in that role. And so part of it too is like matching your personality type to the expectations of the role, because if there's a mismatch there, it's going to be a tough situation.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think one other tactic that I can offer for the introverts.
Yeah. Give it to me. What advice do you have, Mrs. Extrovert?
Well, I think, like, are there ways to gain visibility and gain, like, all those things that the extroverts are doing naturally without feeling like you have to, like, change who you are? And I think leaning into the ways where that's really your superpower, which is thoughtful internal processing, will help you in the long run. You just have to be aware that it's not some like lack that you have where you don't feel comfortable speaking in meetings potentially if you haven't thought it through. But it's like, okay, I've had this idea, I've thought it through, and now how can I communicate that idea even though the meeting is over? Maybe by messaging your manager or whatever it is. To still gain that visibility in a way that feels authentic to you.
I think that is great advice. 100%. And I also think that hybrid work and remote work has enabled introverts to be much more effective at work than when everyone was in the office. And like, it might be weird to like send your boss a message. They'd be like, just come talk to me.
Yeah.
So I actually think I felt like way better, way more effective in a hybrid world because I do have some time where I can, draft thoughtful memos. I can message people that isn't like face-to-face or high energy. That's really helped me. I'm going to give you some tactics. You can react to them. So for the listeners, my first tactic is if you don't know if you're an introvert or extrovert, I would take some of these tests. We are not scientists. They're not scientifically accurate, but I think they are directionally correct.
Yeah.
So if you take 3 or 4 tests, they all say you're an introvert, you're probably an introvert. And that's just going to help you calculate, okay, yeah, I am an introvert. How do I thrive being an introvert? The flip side of that is, again, I'm 60-40.
Yeah.
It's basically a coin toss. And so I think some people assign a label to themselves, I'm an introvert, and that actually makes them more introverted.
Yeah.
It makes them feel like they can't be extroverted. That isn't the case. I do think that we have introverted qualities and we may have extroverted qualities, and it might be a little more draining to bring out the extroversion in you, but sometimes you do need that. I think great leaders, something that makes extroverts great, they're inspiring, they're motivated. You can do that as an introvert. You might just need to be a little thoughtful about when you deploy that.
Yeah.
So don't let it totally define you, but I think it's good to know kind of your strengths and weaknesses there. My second piece of advice is advice for employers. We have seen that introverts are underrepresented, that introverts can be super dynamic, thoughtful, fantastic leaders, and you're not developing that talent likely in your current workplace. So I do think you need more opportunities for leadership development for people that just come off as introverts. They're a little more quiet, like Charlotte. But if you see Charlotte's work, it is amazing.
Yeah,
She's
so great.
so thoughtful, so detailed. But if you had a super extroverted team that wasn't aware of that, they might just be like, oh, Charlotte didn't talk up in a meeting. She doesn't care about this. Like, let's not promote her. You're missing out on talent. My third tactic is create a personal user guide with your team. How do you like to be communicated with? What are you, introverted or extroverted? The better you are able to distinguish the personality types of people on your team, people you're managing, then you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and you can create an environment that's much more effective for them. And then my fourth tactic, which goes out to all my introverts, shout out to you all, is you have to recharge. Particularly now where workplace feels like a 24/7 affair, understanding what gives you energy back and making sure it's like self-care. Like you got to take care of yourself so you can show up and maybe be a little extroverted when you have to. And so I love Susan Cain talked about the 5 or 6 ways introverts recharge. And I was like, are you inside of my brain, Susan? Like she nailed it. It was like talking deeply. I love one-on-one conversations that aren't, super stimulated. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Walking alone. Oh my God. You give me a podcast and let me walk alone. I am so recharged. Reading. Like I love reading. Sometimes I'll literally be at home with Sierra, my girlfriend, be like, I have to go to a different room just so I can read and be alone. And taking some breaks. So there's all these things that you should know how you recharge based on your personality type, and make sure you're putting yourself in situations so you can show up with full energy at work.
I love those. So let us know. Are you introverted? Are you extroverted?
I need to know, are our listeners introverted or extroverted? So this is a call to action, folks. Per my last email at morningbrew.com, subject line,
us.
Introvert, subject line, extrovert, subject line, what the hell are you talking about? Tell us your thoughts on this episode. I'd love to hear them. And as an introvert, I will read your email so thoroughly.
And I will respond, whether I've read it or not.
I love it. All right. Extrovert, introverts, we've united on this podcast.
Yes.
Kayla, should we read the credits?
I think we should.
Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Uchenna Ogu.
Maddie Merritt is our daily newsletter writer.
And Devin Emery is our chief content officer.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Later, y'all.